Hello, in this video I'm going to go over how I created a character creator system inside of Unreal Engine. So we can modify our player's head, we can change their body if we want to do that, their legs, and also their feet. We can zoom out and zoom in and kind of move the camera around. And then once you're done and happy with the character, you can click start, and then you'll be able to play around and move as the character. And then you can also go back to the character creator screen and do the process again if you would like to do that. So I'm going to show you in this video how I built the system and where you can download this project. So this tutorial is going to be a bit different as I'm going to show you how I basically created this project backwards. So I've got this full project and we'll go through the steps that I used to create it. So the first thing I did was create this starting camera. So I'm just going to go to my third person blueprint folder and go to that starting camera. So this is just a pawn blueprint, so blueprint class and select pawn because I wanted it to be able to be possessed by the player. And we just head inside here and go to the viewport. This just contains a spring arm with a camera attached to it. And if I go to the event graph, basically using the mouse X and the mouse Y, I basically add controller yaw input and controller pitch input, which basically allows me to move the camera around. And then we get the control rotation of the player, which will be this camera, and basically use that to determine how the camera can move. So if I just go play, this blueprint basically allows me to just move the camera around. And then we have this zoom in and zoom out blueprint. So if I go back to the viewport, we can see I have the spring arm. Its default value is 250, but as you can see, when I move it, it kind of changes where the camera is. So I'll just change this back to 250. If I go to the event graph, when I basically move the mouse wheel up on my mouse, I basically get the target arm length and then decrease it by 20. This will kind of zoom in to the camera. I've then clamped this value so that the minimum value it can get to is 100, so it can't go any less than 100. And the maximum value this can be is 850. So when I move the mouse wheel up, it kind of zooms in. And then when I move the mouse wheel down, it does the opposite effect and kind of zooms out. And then simply, I just place this camera into the world. And then under the details, I look for pawn. And I just made this auto possess player 0 so that I automatically possess this camera as soon as the game starts. And with that, I basically have this camera which I can just move around and zoom in and zoom out with my clamped values that I selected. So now let's go over how I created this modular third person character where we can edit his face, his body, his legs, and his feet. So I started in the default third person template, and then I just replaced the default third person character with my own character. If you don't have your own starting character, to create one, you just go right click, blueprint class, and select a character, and you will start with this character. You'll probably just need to add a spring arm and a camera if you're creating a new character from scratch, but I just edited the pre-existing third person character. And mine's a bit different because instead of being one, just skeletal mesh, I have a skeletal mesh for the head, the feet, the legs, and the body. And all these skeletal mesh pieces are basically rigged to the same skeleton, which basically easily allows me to swap out any body part that I need to. So for example, this body, I can just replace this with the farmer body, as this farmer body model is also rigged to the same skeleton. And that is because of the way that the creator of these models, Cortana, made them. He basically made one skeletal mesh and then made all these mesh pieces fit to that skeletal mesh. And I've just made some character creator blueprints which basically easily allow us to swap between the different skeletal meshes. We're going to go over in some more detail how I created that system right now. So I'm going to close this. The first thing I did was create an enum, which is basically a list, and in this enum I created the list of the different body parts that I wanted to swap out. So to create that, you can just right click and go blueprints and then select enumeration. And then I called my enumeration body parts. And then you can just click add enumerator to add an enumerator, and you can just I think it's click this bin icon to remove one. And I created one for the head, the body, the legs, and the feet. So I had all the different body parts that I wanted to change. Once I'd created that enumeration, I then created this body structure. So a structure basically contains a bunch of different variables that you want to contain. So again, to create it, you just go blueprint and then select structure. And I called mine body structure, and inside the structure, the first blueprint that I had, the first variable that I had was the body part enum that I just made. So you just look for whatever you called your enum, then it should be here. And then the second one is image. So this is basically for this variable, I just wanted it to display the 2D image of what my character would be changing it into. And then for the third variable that I wanted this to be the skeletal mesh that my character would change into. So with this structure, I'd be able to determine what body part it was, the image that I wanted this body part to display, and the skeletal mesh of what I wanted it to change to. Once I'd created this, I created a data table. So data table just kind of contained like a bunch of information, and I created my data table of the body structure. So to do that, you can just right click, and then it's miscellaneous, and you go data table, and then you can pick a row or structure, and then I picked the body structure. So this structure that I made, and I clicked OK. And then once I've done that, it created this data table. And then currently, when you first create a data table, it will be completely blank. But what I basically did was click add, and then it'll kind of be blank. And then in this data table, I basically created each body part that I wanted my character to be able to swap into. So first, I would pick the body part that I wanted the character to be able to change. So I could pick the head, body, or legs. So for this example, let's say I just select head. Then I selected the image that I wanted to be displayed, and my character would swap onto the body part. So I created an image for each body part that the character can change into. So let's just pick the adventurer head. Then we'd select the skeletal mesh that we'd want the player to actually turn into when they clicked on this image. So then I imported all the skeletal meshes that I wanted, and then you just select one. So I kind of basically did this with all the body parts that I wanted to add. So you can see I have a bunch of head body parts, I have a bunch of body parts, I have a bunch of leg body parts, and I have a bunch of feet body parts. So I'm just going to remove this row. And with this, I kind of had all the data that I kind of needed to create my character creator system. So next, let's go over how I use some blueprints to kind of put this all together. So I created this user interface called Character Creator UI, and then inside of my starting camera, as soon as the game starts, I basically create this Character Creator UI and then add it to the viewport. Inside of this Character Creator UI, I have this scroll box, and then I have some text which says face, body, legs, and feet. And underneath each of these, I have another scroll box, and inside here, I kind of use the data table that I created to fill it with buttons, which basically display the image of each body part, and when the character kind of clicks on them, it will change the third person character in the world to have that skeletal mesh. So that's what these scroll boxes represent. And then the start button, when the player clicks the start button, they will automatically possess the third person character inside of the world. So let's go over the blueprints inside of this widget. So in the event graph, the first thing I do is event construct. I get my mouse cursor and make it so that you can see it inside of the screen. And then inside of this level, there's this third person character. And what I do is just get all actors of class, and I get the character reference inside of the game, and I just store this as a reference. And then in the designer, when the player clicks the start button, what I do is I remove from parent, which basically removes the widget on the screen, and then I automatically possess the third person character with the player controller, and I make it so that you can't see the mouse cursor, and that we're in game mode. So as soon as you click the start button, you automatically possess whatever character you've created. Next, let's go over how I kind of use the data table to kind of use all the data that I created to make it so that you can kind of swap each skeletal mesh piece. So what we do, so I do this for each body part, so that's why there are 4 sequences. One represents the head, body, legs, and feet. So let's go over how I did one. So the first thing I do is get my data table row name. So I get my character customizable data table, that's why I called it. Then I do a for each loop, because I want to get each element inside of my data table. And then we look for get data table row character, so we get the whatever our data table is called. So here I just select my data table again, and then you want to hook up row name to array element. And what we're basically doing is basically getting each row inside of this data table. And then from here, we can basically represent each variable that I basically created inside of this data table, which is formed of this body structure. And then for this first section, I filter it and make sure that our row body part is kind of equal to the head enum. So for this first bit of blueprint that I do, I only want to get every single element which is a head body part. So off of here, I kind of just drag off and look for, is this equal to the head body part? If that is true, I create this button, and this button basically takes in a couple of variables. It takes in the image from our data table, it takes in the body part row from our data table, and it takes in the skeletal mesh that it will need to convert. And I add this button to this scroll box. So if you remember in the designer, I have a scroll box under each body part, and then I add this button underneath this face body part. And when the player kind of clicks on this button, they'll basically change into whatever was in this data table. So let's go over how I basically created this change button. So I'm just going to go browse, and I'm going to go into this change button. So I made this be desired on screen, and I added this size box, which was 150 in length and 130 in width. I then added this button, and I added an overlay and an image inside of this button. Then if we head into this graph, I made a variable called image, I made a variable called skeletal mesh, and I made a variable called body parts. I made them all instance editable and expose on spawn. That way, when I create them, I can basically feed in this data so it knows what body part it is on the button, what skeletal mesh is on the button, and what image is on the button. Then event construct, what I do is I get the image, which is basically set when we create this button, and I make it so that the image here, so it's called image 52, I make it so that the brush of this image is basically whatever image that I set inside of here. Then I make it so that when this button is clicked, so scroll down, when this button is clicked, what I do is I get whatever body part it is. So in the character creator UI, we basically tell the button which body part it is. So if this is a head body part, then it will go to this code when this button is clicked. And then what I do is I reference my third person character, and then I call the swap head event, and it gets the skeletal mesh, which is here, and it swaps the third person character's head with whatever the skeletal mesh is here. So one thing I forgot, I also made this third person character reference, which is also instance editable and exposed on spawn. And then I get the third person character that we basically reference at the start when this is created and feed it into the button so it knows which third person character to reference. And then I call this swap event, which is inside the third person character reference, and it swaps the third person character's head with whatever the skeletal mesh is. So let's just head inside this blueprint. So we have my basic third person character, and the only blueprints inside of here are the swap body parts. So these are some custom events which swap out the player's different body parts. So to create a custom event, you can just right click and go add custom event, and then it'll create a custom event which you can reference. And for the swap head custom event, what I did is in this custom event you can add inputs. So I just added an input which was a skeletal mesh, and then I named it head. And then what I did is I just dragged in my mesh from my components part, and then I just dragged off here and look for set skeletal mesh, and then I set the head skeletal mesh to be whatever's in this swap head event. And in this change button, we basically know what the skeletal mesh we want to swap to, so we store it in here. And then when we call the swap head event, it basically changes the character skeletal mesh to whatever is inside of this variable. And inside of our button, we basically know what we want to change the skeletal mesh to. And then I kind of do that for each other body part. So for the second one, I get the data table again. I get each row inside the data table, but this time I just filter it by body part. So I only want to create a button if the body part row is equal to body, If it is, I create a button which contains the image, skeletal mesh, and third-person character reference and body part for every single body part inside of my data table. And then we add this to the body scroll box, so then it'll be added to this body scroll box. And then inside the button we get the image that we want it to be, and then depending on the body part will depend on what kind of custom event is triggered. So when this body part's a body and we click on the button, it will swap the character's body part. And then I kind of do the same thing for the swap legs and the swap feet. And then with that, I kind of had created the character creator system. So I had this camera, I just dragged in this third person character into the world. And when you click play, you start off as this camera, which you can move around with, zoom in and zoom out. I can select this horse head, this body, suit body, this leg. I'll select the spacesuit legs, and this, and then you go start, and then you automatically possess the character and can move around. And then inside of the level blueprint, I just made a quick blueprint so that when you click the R key, you get the current level name, and then you open this level, and then it kind of just like restarts the system. So with that, I had created a character creator system inside of Unreal Engine 5. So I have an announcement. I'm going to be creating a Patreon. This project and any future tutorials and project, you'll be able to get the full project files on my Patreon. So that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.